All right, so everyone, I'd like you to welcome Joe Monteleone, who is going to talk to us tonight about the history of tarot, its development, some other little tidbits here and there, and perhaps some ways of working with the symbolism of tarot.
Hi everyone, my name is Joe Monteleone. I'm the founder of the Tarot Mysticism Academy, which is an online tarot school for professional and spiritual development. We do a lot of cool stuff. It's now international. So before I start any class, I like to go over just a couple what I call presuppositions or disclaimers, and this is just because I want to tell you how I approach tarot, and just so you know that what I say is not like necessarily the truth, it's just my interpretation, my research. And tarot can be a lot of things, and we're going to talk about how many things it can be. But just really quickly, I believe that belief can be a tool, like intention. So if you believe in something, let your beliefs work for you. So take what you want from this class and leave the rest. You don't have to believe any of it if you don't want. You can just stare at my pretty face. Cool. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. That comes from chaos magic, but that's something I use with tarot. It's like nothing's necessarily true, because when you look at something as true, there's like an energy polarity, and you make a conclusion, and it can actually hold you back. So I always approach things with curiosity and openness, and in some ways, I don't believe in anything, but I am curious about everything. Tarot is something you build up inside of you. Every person's tarot is different. So somebody asked earlier about different interpretations, and everyone's gonna have different interpretations of the cards. So my deck is not gonna be your deck, and you're gonna see this especially throughout history, but even today, it's all kind of based on interpretation. Everything I say is BS, which stands for my belief system. So everyone has a BS because we are each the Fool card of the tarot. The Fool is card number 0. Have you ever seen the Fool? So the way I look at tarot is like an art. And Krishnamurti, he's an interesting guy. He defines art as putting things where they belong. And so that's what I see tarot does. It's kind of like a contemplative wardenship of reality. We're organizing reality, consciousness, ourselves, our life into these ideas, and vice versa, to express different themes in life and engage with it. I believe tarot is something you can use to engage with your life, not escape it. And then the last thing is I say no conclusions, only questions and choice. Tarot is just an interesting point of view. It's currently my favorite point of view, but the map is not the territory. And one last thing, I drink a lot of water when I lecture, so excuse me ahead of time. I don't know what it is. It just gets moving and I get excited, but just so you know. So, let's talk about the word esoteric. Does anyone have an idea what esoteric means? Cool. Everyone's like, I know what esoteric means, but I'm not going to say it. So tarot is an esoteric tool, and this, I'll tell you the way I kind of view these things. I find that in different philosophies, spiritual traditions, religions, there's always some like inner circle, right? There's always some like extra credit people of a faith, of a culture, of a whatever, and they're trying to like get the most out. They're like the teacher's pet of the tradition, and they kind of like make what I call an esoteric tradition or a mysticism, or there's many words for it, but they're pretty much trying to like get enlightened in different languages. Now this isn't true for everything, but it's just generally a theme with tarot. So esoteric describes anything that is meant to be understood by only a select few people. I mean, now it's 2021 and you have weirdos like me shouting the esoteric to the top of their lungs, clearly, but it's not meant to be understood by the masses. And tarot isn't kind of an esoteric thing. There's lots of things hidden within it, and we're gonna get into some of those ideas today. So why is esoteric secretive? Well, for one, people would hide it because they would be persecuted if they were discovered. For another purpose, it's because the nature of a lot of esotericism is very weird and cannot be understood by just anyone. It takes a lot of practice, a lot of stuff, a lot of whatever. Is it a little elitist? Totally, but it's 2021 now and we can talk about whatever we want. Isn't that cool? So, any questions or ideas so far?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Were you saying tarot is an energy?
Tarot is an energy?
Did you say that earlier, or did I just misinterpret?
I didn't say that earlier, but I like that.
Okay, I said it.
That's a you original.
No, I thought you said that. I'm sorry.
That's cool though.
No, I thought when you were first talking about tarot, you were saying it was, but so that's not what you said.
No, that's not what I said, but I kind of like that because it kind of makes sense because like Reiki's an energy and you can transmit it. Maybe tarot can do, maybe we'll start that today.
You can have that.
The first transmission of tarot's energy. I like that. We'll talk.
Okay.
We can start a business out of this.
Okay.
Did you know Reiki was made by a Buddhist dropout? Isn't that cool? He was like, oh, I can't do Buddhism, so I'm going to do my own thing. No, that's not how it went, but kind of. So, what is tarot? I'm going to give you some of my definitions, and this is not the only definitions, but I see the tarot as 78 memes of consciousness. That's current. Does anyone know what a meme is?
No, what a what?
A meme, M-E-M-E. A meme, M-E-M-E. So a meme is something that travels along the internet, usually just for fun. It like represents something and it usually has words under it. Usually it's funny. You see them on Facebook or wherever. Just funny like ideas. And meme comes from the word mime or mimetic, meaning to copy. So tarot is just like 28 ideas, like memes, like you see on Instagram or something, of consciousness itself. So it's kind of like, if you're looking at like the Egyptian origin, which may or may not exist, you can imagine like Egyptians coming together and be like, okay, 78 memes of consciousness, what are they gonna be? And then putting them all together. That's probably not what happened, but you know, who knows? Okay, tarot is a psycho-spiritual amalgamation of images, symbols, archetypes, and pretty cool ideas. Tarot is a historical train wreck of esoteric traditions, old ideas, and new ideas. It keeps getting developed. So I started tarot 20 years ago, and tarot's not what it was 20 years ago. It keeps changing, keeps growing. There's a lot of similarities, obviously, but tarot is probably not a spell book from ancient Egypt, but maybe. Who knows? Tarot is definitely a spiritual technology with alchemical, hermetic, Kabbalistic, astrological, and magical influences. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, all that stuff. We'll get into some of those today and how they influence tarot. Tarot is a method of divination and is definitely a method of reflection and personal realization. I believe tarot is also, in some ways, a method of enlightenment. In the same way that there's Eastern mysticism, there's also Western mysticism. And they both flirt here and there throughout history, but yeah. Tarot is definitely a gateway drug into the occult. I just wanted to see who was going to get up and leave. Right, so when I say the word occult, I'm not talking about devil worship. You're not in a cult or anything like that. Occult, similar idea. I use it similarly as the word esoteric. It's just like the hidden, the unknown, all that extra credit philosophy, all the stuff the Greek guys were doing, like early on, hanging out with a lot of time on their hands, contemplating the universe. You know, Pythagoras, his stuff was burned down, you know, they thought he was a cult. And he was just playing with numbers. All right, so, any questions so far?
I have a question
Yeah.
about tarot.
Yes.
When you go to reading me as a visitor to you, am I supposed to be very specific or very vague?
Great question. Are you supposed to be specific or vague when getting a reading? So it depends on the reader, and to be on either one. So I'd be able to do a full reading for you without you giving me anything and tell you what shows up. But what I find is when you ask a question, it helps me filter and look for what you're asking for, but it also sets an intention. So then I could look, it kind of makes it more specific. So I have found that when you don't have a question, sometimes what shows up is a little bit more general, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that.
Am I supposed to take action after that?
After you get a reading?
After the reading, yes, sir.
Oh, I think it's great to take action. I mean, I think it's always good to trust your intuition. But the thing with reading is I'm my style of reading. I mean, I also do a lot of coaching too. It's like if I read for someone and we look at certain blocks, then I always say, okay, do this or do that, or like focus on this. I'm all about taking action from tarot. So I think, and a fun question you can ask the cards if you read for yourself, you can say, what energy can I be to accomplish this? And see, that gives you control. See, I'm big about like your infinite beings, and to be honest, when I'm reading tarot, this is a trade secret, by the way. When I'm reading tarot, I'm picking up from your awareness and pulling out of you what you already know. Now you'll never have to go to the psychic again. But I can't, like so much of the time I'll give a reading, and it's really a great reading, and it's very cathartic, and it's very healing, and at the end someone says, yeah, you know what, I really knew all that, but hearing you say it really made the difference. And so I'm pulling from your energy. So at the end of the day, I think the answers are within you. A lot of times when I'm reading for someone, I'll actually do a certain type of energy or body work to get the answer directly from their body. But yeah, I always say, yes, definitely take action after a reading for what you want to create. So let's get into this history. So when we're thinking and talking about tarot and the history of tarot, we have to ask, it's kind of the history of symbols. And so we really want to start with shamanism. We're going to go way back. Yeah.
So on your arm, is that Metatron's cube?
I don't have Metatron on my arm, but I have him on this. This is Metatron's cube.
Okay, well I just saw the
Do I have
circles and
Metatron?
I'm like, I wonder.
No, I don't think I have him on my arms. Not yet. Soon. I am a walking billboard for the occult, by the way. It's like the secret to the national treasure is actually on my body. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump into shamanism. So in shamanism, I'm going to actually make a list up here. So what do we have? We have states, use of symbols. Okay. So shamanism, we have, how do we spell altered? E-R?
Yes.
Cool. Altered states of consciousness. We have symbols, circles. So that's where, and obviously a lot more, but just for our purposes, I'm going to give you some of the main things that show up in tarot. And ritual. So this comes from shamanism. Okay. So from shamanism, then we go to 3500 BC, Sumerians start happening, 3150 BC, the blooming of Egypt, and we get the Egyptian mysteries, and we get the invention of papyrus. So people start writing things down. Papyrus, not paper, but we're getting there. 2350, we have the oldest astrological text coming from Sumeria. 2300, the Babylonians bring us emanation theory. So emanation theory is the idea that the universe is created in stages and that there's a subtle and then a more manifest universe, and it keeps going down. So if you imagine like heaven creating the earth above going into the below. So we have emanation theory there. So up to this point we have all these plus paper, astrology, emanation theory. I'm going to put a question mark for paper because it's still being developed. Astrology, emanation theory. Okay. So, any questions so far?
Yes.
Yes.
Does Egyptian mystery school tie into this?
Yes, but to be totally honest with you, my knowledge of the Egyptian mysteries is like nothing, so I'd have to like get another source for that. But there has been a lot of, I'm gonna say remixes of Egyptian mysteries. So if you look through the tarot, there is like hints to it. But if I wouldn't be able to say, oh, this is exactly what they were doing like 3500 BC.
Then anyone, because I researched it too and I can't find anything about Egyptian mysteries for.
You know, there is something called, and I don't know if this is how you say it, but I think it's called Kemet or Kemetis, not Hermeticism, but Kemet. There is like a modern Egyptian mystery school.
Okay.
They're really cool. They have beautiful ankhs. One of my friends is part of it, and I can try to find them and send it to you, but
That'd be great, yeah.
it's like a modern, like, remix. A lot of this stuff is kind of like modern interpretation of the past, and we're going to see that throughout history, how people keep looking into the past again to like get more knowledge, and is it accurate, is it not?
I'm very knowledgeable about this stuff. I find it very vague, the information I have gotten on it.
Yeah, I mean, Egyptian, totally. I mean, yeah, that's definitely far back. So, but I don't know too much about that. However, you do have people like Aleister Crowley, who created the Thoth deck, and it's so Egyptian. But is it actually Egyptian, or is it Crowley's remix of Egyptian? It's like
I have Tarot cards actually.
it's a good deck. It's
Yeah,
actually my favorite one.
It's a rare deck.
Yeah, the Thoth deck is like the manual to the Rider-Waite Smith, which is like the automatic. Thoth deck is where it's at. If you're into that stuff. So, now let's jump to 6th century BC. We have Persians conquering Mesopotamia, and we have a guy named Zoroaster. Zoroaster comes in, and he focuses on free will and duality of forces. We'll add that in a bit. We have Pythagoras. He creates a school and starts talking about numbers and lots of mysticism, emanation theory, and his school is unfortunately burnt down. What else does he do? Reincarnation, power of numbers, geometry, music, all these mystical ideas, connecting all of them. And then we have our friend Empedocles shows up around this time. Now Empedocles, at this time, Greek philosophers were asking the question, how is this stuff made? How is the universe made? Where does everything come from? And you had people saying, well, it obviously comes from water, because water is everywhere. You had people say it's come from the air, because air is everywhere. And Empedocles shows up and says, everyone chill, there's actually 4 elements, fire, air, water, earth, and they're still used today. So does the actual universe come from those 4 elements? Probably not. But the psychological and or spiritual implications of these 4 elements are pretty strong. And I mean, that idea stuck around, so it has to have something to it, right? So we have 4 elements. And then we have Plato around 300s BC. He comes up with the world of forms. So Plato comes up and says, well, everything that exists in the world has this abstract divine form. So for example, there's all these trees, but somewhere there's this perfect abstract tree, and every tree manifests out of this perfect tree. Emanation theory again. You're gonna see that all these topics interlace with all the other ones. So up to this point, we have altered states of consciousness, use of symbol paper being developed, astrology, emanation theory, and let's add our new things, duality of forces. And we have divine abstraction. That's Plato's thing. That's not how you spell divine. Do you guys want me to write this stuff, or do you want me to just tell you? Write it? Okay.
I can't read it, but.
Oh, you can't read it? Oh, no. I'll try to write it bigger.
What? No, I think you need a dark marker. Yes.
Let's see what else we have.
Your marker is dying darker.
We have a brown.
On the left there.
Let's do this. Yeah. All right, divine abstraction. So I had divine abstraction. What else do we have? Divine abstraction. Numbers, geometry, and the 4 elements. Numbers. Geometry. And the 4 elements. Cool. All right. So, 4th century-ish, Alexander the Great is having a good time. He found Alexandria in 332, and something really cool happens here. So Alexandria is like the hot place to be, and we have Egyptians, we have Greek, we have Jewish culture, all coming together to create this really cool culture called Hellenism. So we got a bunch of people talking about mysticism, philosophy, a bunch of stuff, and Hermes, the Greek god of communication, and the Egyptian Thoth, they fused together to create this really cool dude named Hermes Trismegistus, who's this wise sage. I'm gonna call him Hermes Tris. So Hermes Tris is like the sage that comes down and people channel him-ish. What really happened, we don't know. And he kind of writes a bunch of stuff called the Hermetica. Now people were channeling him, writing the Hermetica. It's about like 20 or some books on the nature of being and the creation of the universe. And that becomes the origin of the law of attraction. Now that you might have to fact check, but I believe that law of attraction, all that stuff, kind of comes out of Hermeticism. So Hermeticism is saying a bunch of stuff. We'll get into the theories in a little bit. But another thing that's important around this time is that you have Egyptian, Jewish, Greek culture, plus Pythagorean and Platonic philosophy, plus Jewish mysticism, all coming together, and that gives birth to alchemy. So alchemy, the forerunner of modern chemistry, is both a spiritual and material practice of making things better than what they are. And the idea of alchemy is that everything is, in a very slow process, becoming better over time. So what the alchemists want to do is take these metals and turn them into gold. They want to turn lead into gold. And the idea is it's going to happen anyway, but they want to do it right now. And metaphorically, they're turning their soul into gold as well. So they're kind of speeding up the process to this idea of almost enlightenment. Cool?
Can I ask you a question? So,
Yeah.
So what is it? It's called, what is it? What did you call it?
Hermetica. So I'll put that up right now. So Hermetica
Thank you.
is I'm going to put the actual word Hermeticism and alchemy. They, for our intents and purposes, these two are kind of the same thing. Not really, but I think they're very related in terms of their worldview. So we have Hermes Tris, Egyptian mysteries. Oh wait, we got to add Greek philosophy, Jewish mysticism. Did we add Greek philosophy? No, Jewish mysticism. So the actual writing of the Hermetica was done around the 3rd century CE, and I'll give you the general story of what. Do you want me to give you the story, or do you want to, or no? Yeah.
Please.
Okay, so the general story of the Hermetica, and I think it's kind of important because it's very influential in tarot, is that there's this large infinite mind. And this is that moment when I say, like, take what you want, leave the rest. But the idea here is there's this large infinite mind, which is everything, God, the source, the universe, and from it comes the logos. And the logos is the will of the universe, but also, like Hermes, the messenger of the universe, but also the cosmic MC that's trying to hype up this party, which is reality. So he comes down and he's like, all right, people, like, this is the will, this is what we're doing. And it creates a smaller mind. So they believed everything was mind. They believed everything was mental. Law of attraction, right? If you can hold it in your mind, you can hold it in your hand. So the smaller mind, which was called the maker of things, used 7 planets to create stuff. And it was through the vehicles of these 7 planets that the earth was made. And then there's a sun of this large mind, and that sun is us. And what happened was, when the earth was made, we looked into the earth, got a little carried away, got stuck in it, had a good time, and now we are manifesting in this earth. And in Hermeticism, the idea is we want to come back to the source. And that very story is paralleled with Jewish mysticism and Pythagorean philosophy a little bit. But yeah, so we're going to see patterns of this, like, as above, so below. We are a reflection of what is happening above.
When you say geometry, do you
Yes.
mean sacred geometry?
Sacred geometry, yeah,
Okay.
totally. So I just want to give you some major points about the Hermetica. And if you want, you can throw your hands up if you vibe with it. So here's some major philosophies with the Hermetica, which I think are cool. Number 1, the world is a living being. Woo, oh, cool. Number 2, consciousness, or the mind, goes beyond the body and is very big. Oh, I definitely believe that. Number 3, imagination is real and does things. Yeah. Number 4, the idea of correspondence. So the idea of correspondence is as above, so below. So this idea says that you can look at it like what's happening in the planets is happening in the world, or you can say that the same patterns existing in the cosmos are somehow existing in our plane, or somehow existing in the cells of our body. You see this on Instagram a lot. People say as above, so below. I think it's a cool idea. I think it's cool. Number 5, this is our alchemy coming back in. Everything is growing, changing, and becoming better all the time. Oh. Oh, I don't know, maybe. Growing and changing for sure. Number 6, the perennial philosophy. The perennial philosophy is the idea that all philosophies, religions, and cultures come somehow from the same original culture or idea. I kind of play with that. I like that. And then the last one is, this is kind of a little bit more specific, but this one is a truth gained through initiation or transmission. So the idea here is that with the Hermetica, with alchemy, like in some of this stuff, it's like you had to have a master to like go deep into this kind of stuff. But I mean, we were talking about Reiki before, like the transmission of Reiki. I don't know, maybe it's a cool idea. All right, so let's just want to put some of these up here because you'll see them in tarot a lot. Where's that thing? So we have ideas of imagination, important. We have big mind. We have, that's not a dude. We have correspondence. We have, I'm going to put this as above, so below. And what else we got here? We had consciousness, correspondence, imagination, everything growing, perennial philosophy. Growing. And perennial. If you want to dig into the perennial philosophy, well, there's a lot of books written about it, but Huxley has a cool book, literally called The Perennial Philosophy. Has a lot of like Christian ideas, which are cool. All right, so 244. Now we are playing with Neoplatonism. So what Plotinus comes along and does is he takes Plato, the Greek philosopher, and he adds mysticism, combines that. His students start categorizing the universe in new ways. So that's a fun topic to do, like categorizing like different emanations and different ideas of the universe. Let's see, we have 5th century, the fall of Rome, and then Emperor, oh, the first big cancel. So 538, Emperor Justinian cancels everything but Christianity. So we go dark for about 1,000 years. But people are still doing stuff. People are still playing with the ideas, maybe in secret or maybe hidden, right? Because occult, esoteric. So we have people around the 6th century, like Pseudo-Dionysius, starting to play with angels and how the angels relate to Kabbalah and the universe and all that. So that's where we get stuff like seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, all these classes of angels. And we kind of see those a little bit in tarot as well. So we gotta add angels, we gotta add categories, Neoplatonism. 7th century, so we have so much stuff right now already to play with. And it's like, where are we gonna put this stuff down? Like, where's that paper? So finally, in the 7th century, paper making spreads to India. 8th century, paper making spreads to the Middle East. And in 900, we have our first deck of cards in China. So let's see what else we got. 12th century, we have the development of the Kabbalah, or further development, which is Jewish mysticism, which has already had like a strand through our history. And let's see what else. We have in the 13th century, playing cards are finally introduced to the Islamic world in the Middle East, and there's a deck called the Mamluk deck, M-A-M-L-U-C-K, and it is one of the first decks we see with 4 suits and pick cards. So we're getting a little bit closer. And then in the 14th century, let me see. Okay, so we have all this stuff, plus angels. And we have paper. And we have a 4-suit deck. So we're jumping into the Middle East a little bit, but we're going to come back to Europe and things are going to get going again, okay? So we have lots of things from different places. What fun stuff happens in the 15th century? So in the 15th century, remember how I said before how like we tend to kind of love the past? We kind of fetishize the past a little bit. We're always looking towards the past for some ancient answer. Well, that really happened in the 15th century in Italy. You had people like Cosimo de' Medici setting up a school and hiring Marsilio Ficino to research these ideas. Pretty much, like probably half of this stuff is what he was like looking into. Greek philosophy, and then he actually got a copy of the Hermetica, which he translated, which was the big hot thing in Italy at the time. So they were translating the Hermetica and playing with those ideas. We have other people like Pico de Mirandola synthesizing Kabbalah and Hermeticism. We have another person synthesizing Christianity and Kabbalah. So like they're merging more and more again. So it kind of goes like this. Things happen, they go out, and then they come back together. They flirt a little bit, they go out in different directions, they come back together. And then eventually, somewhere around the 15th century, we have a 5th suit added to our 4-suit deck. And this is what historians consider the first tarot, because the tarot deck has 4 suits made in wands, cups, swords, and pentacles. But then there's this 5th suit that just has names. They're like archetypes or positions, like the priestess or the fool. And so in the 15th century, we have The Duke of Milan in Italy has somebody create a deck for him, and he's using Greek gods. And eventually, this fifth suit, which is originally Greek gods, becomes representative of the parades of the time. So there were these parades that would express the culture of the Renaissance in different positions and different ideas. And so the cards became known as triumphs or triumphi, meaning triumph. The parade was called the triumph. So it was just very like the pop culture of the time being put on cards, but with some hidden mysteries there. And remember, at the same time, we're translating Hermeticum, we're looking at Greek philosophy, we're looking at all this stuff. So we have a fifth suit and Renaissance, fun Renaissance culture. What is this? Maybe this one will work. Fifth suit. I'm just going to put Ren culture. If you like Renaissance culture, you can visit me at the New York Renaissance Fair I work at over the summer. It's my favorite place to be. It's so much fun. What else we got? Okay, so we have a lot of stuff going on here. Eventually, in 1499, the King of France, Louis XII, invades Milan, and that brings the cards to France. Some other things that happen. Oh yeah, so France really picks it up, starts making more decks. They call it the Carte da Triomphe, cards of triumph, I believe. But maybe not, fact check that. They changed the name to Tarocchi, which was a game. And tarot was mostly a game, by the way. It was originally kind of like a game, but maybe having esoteric underlying ideas. The French changed the name to tarot, Tarraux, and eventually shortened the whole word to Tarot. That was around the 16th century-ish, or later on. Let's see what else we got. So, any questions so far?
How did they use it as a game? What kind of?
I think it was like modern day bridge, which I actually don't even know how to play, but that's what I heard.
Okay.
Or like a capture and tricking game.
So before they had paper, how did they have all these things you talked about?
These are just like the ideas that were running around the time.
Oh, okay.
So like, for example, we wouldn't be able to pick up like a Marseille or one of the older decks and say exactly where these symbols are coming from. But in the Renaissance, it was like culture was a big thing. So like these are like generally the ideas that people were playing with, or at least, I mean, by the Renaissance, it was more like alchemy was a thing. Obviously, Christianity was a thing. We have some a grimoire tradition as well. Magic was a little bit of a thing. So the ideas were kind of playing a part. Christian mysticism, Kabbalah, all that.
By word of mouth.
Yeah, pretty much. And you know, when you have people, when you have wealthy people with a lot of time on their hands, they eventually ask these deep questions, especially when they get older. And actually, when Marsilio Ficino was translating the Hermetica, he was doing it immediately because Cosimo was like dying soon. And he was like, all right, I need you to stop the Greek stuff and translate the Hermetica because this is the new thing and I want to know about it before I go. So it's kind of like they just want this knowledge. So that's why I like to kind of show just the general vibe of like when these cards are being created. And actually, what happened is probably the same thought showed up in the 1700s. We have some French occultists showing up, and they start making these interesting claims. They start saying that tarot is from Egypt, and that it's the sacred book of Thoth, and that it's meant to do cool things. Specifically, Antoine Court de Geblon and friends start writing about tarot as this ancient thing. In the late 1700s, we have Atea, which makes the first, from my knowledge, published deck for divination specifically. So he was very into the occult. He said tarot had Egyptian origin, and he designed his own deck. By the 1800s, tarot is a common game across France, Switzerland, and northern Italy. And then somewhere around that time, we have Eliphas Levi, who writes a book called Transcendental Magic. And the cool thing, this is where things really start to tie up for modern tarot. He writes this book where he uses tarot to fuse Kabbalah, alchemy, Hermeticism, Pythagorean number system, astrology, and ceremonial magic. So they all start to come together in this book. And then, this is where it ties together even more, in the late 1800s, we start getting this occult revival with things like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So we have people coming together, exploring magic, exploring occultism, exploring all these ideas. And from that group of people, we get this deck by Arthur Edward Waite. So this deck Not necessarily explicitly, but if you like kind of research the symbols and stuff, they're working with a lot of this material. Now, can you say specifically it was drawn from all these things? Maybe not, but they're kind of working with all these traditions. So we do have stuff like Hermeticism, we do have Kabbalah, we do have Neoplatonic ideas, and yeah.
What was the name of the book that tied it all together? You just said.
The book one of the books that ties it all together is it's called Transcendental Magic. The original title is The Doctrine of High Magic, and it's by Eliphas Levi. I'll write him down.
When was that written? 1800s?
Early 1800s. I actually don't have the exact date of that one. So he writes this book and he kind of organizes it based on the Kabbalah. He looks at each chapter is kind of based on a letter of the Hebrew alphabet and also a tarot card. And he it's kind of a weird read. I think it's kind of cool though. It's definitely not a book to read for like practical like divination, but it is a book if you want to like go down the wormhole. And he was very influential. So my point into showing you all this stuff is that over time, people look into the past and they kind of reinterpret and expand upon it. And if you were, let's say, to start reading tarot tomorrow, that would happen. You would take all these symbols, interpret it in your life, in your world, and you would probably add to it. You would probably add information to it. And I just want to show you how eclectic tarot can really be. Now, this deck, the Rider-Waite Tarot, which was directed by Arthur Edward Waite and created by someone named Pixie, Pamela Coleman Smith. She was hired by him. She was in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. He was a high-ranking member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They made this deck, which became the most popular deck in the world. And I believe it did that because they started to illustrate the pit cards. So we have minor arcana, which are like the suited cards. And normally in tarot, not all tarot, but the original tarot decks, you would just have like the symbols of the number. So if it was the 4 of Wands, you would just have 4 wands. But what they chose to do is actually illustrate like the 9 of Wands. You have an actual picture happening here. Now they weren't the first person to do this. I think the Solabuska was the first deck to do this, and Solabuska actually influenced this deck a lot. But so 95% of today's tarot decks are based on this deck, which comes out of all of that. Now, I also want to make the point that you don't have to know any of that to play with tarot or to use tarot. In fact, a lot of the readers that I know for divination, like the amazing readers that have read me like the back of a candy bar, don't know any of that. That's just stuff to if you're interested for history and theory. Okay. And then what else has happened? Since then, 1969, we got another deck by Aleister Crowley called the Thoth deck, which is the second most used deck today. It's my favorite deck. And he adds a whole bunch of occult stuff. He adds some of his own religion and his own philosophy, and it's a beautiful deck. And yeah, people are still making decks today.
Why is it your favorite?
It's my favorite because it's more explicit in the use of the esoteric systems. So I really like Kabbalah and how it relates to tarot. So he's very explicit in like, this is how it relates. Whereas this deck, though it's subtle, like the Kabbalah is in this deck, but the author doesn't write about it. His book is pretty good, actually. He has a book called Pictorial Key to the Tarot, and it's a great book, but it's very simple. And he intended for this deck to be used by everyone. And the Thoth deck was not necessarily intended to just be like for everyone, like for divination necessarily. But yeah, and I think some of Crowley's views are interesting. Not all of them, but it's interesting stuff. Also, the art is just so cool. Let me just go into this real quick. So, how does tarot work? I'll just give you some theories. The old school theory is maybe the cards are magical. Do I think the cards are magical? If you make them magical, totally. You can consecrate them, you can have intention, you can totally make them magical. I believe that the tarot is a framework for your intuition. So when you pull a card, things show up. It triggers something in the mind, the neural circuits go, you have memories, you have ideas, you have associations about the symbols. Something always shows up. Whether it's divinatory or not, it's up to you to decide. I've seen arguments that the tarot is purely psychological, And I've seen people argue for the Barnum effect, which is when it's like you hear something about yourself and you identify with it because it's so generic. And I've heard that a lot. And to that I say, what's wrong with that? If it helps, if it does something positive. I think that's totally fine. And I also, this is a Joe original, I believe that each card works because I believe that each card is relevant all the time. I believe that the cards reflect the human condition in a way where we understand them in some way, and we can always reflect on each of them in some way. So for example, like, we've all had pain, we've all had emotional pain, we've all had to get through something, we've all had guilt, we've all had too much on our hands at one point, we've all created something, had a new goal, we've all, let's see what else, maybe helped somebody out at some point, maybe given somebody money, helped someone with something. We've all held our tongue, like the meanings you can get like literal with them, you can get figurative with them. But yeah, I believe they're all active all the time. And then, yeah, so, and then somebody asked this, but I think you asked maybe before we started the class, so I want to answer this. And maybe someone didn't ask this, but I have a question, maybe this is from another class. Is it the cards or is it the reader? So is it the cards doing the divination or is it the reader? I believe that, this is my weird answer, is that they're the same thing. Where do you begin and where do you end? Is it your mind or is it the cards? In a mystical sense, but in terms of like, a simple answer, I think it's the reader that does the actual reading. And the questioner. So you come in for a reading and your intention or your question or wherever you're at, you're gonna bring that energy. The reader's gonna work with that energy and from their own mind, from their own experiences, from their own psychic ability, use the cards to kind of hone it. Cool. And I don't know if everyone was here when I said this, but I believe everybody's psychic. I believe we're all aware, very much so. And we can choose to be psychic or not.
So how can you capitalize on your energy and the card's energies to make the reading the best?
How do you capitalize on your energy and the card's energy to make the reading the best? The way I look at it is the cards trigger something in my mind, and usually most of the time what comes out is relevant or like kind of helpful or does something. There's a few different ways. If I'm like channeling, which is, I mean, I think everyone can channel. I think we all have connections to things. But if I'm kind of, sometimes I'll go in the zone. I'll just flip the card and it will bring me somewhere. And then I'll just be there for like a minute, say what I have to say, and then kind of come back. But sometimes I'll just talk about the card and kind of what I'm getting. So it's, yeah, there's a lot of different ways. How do you capitalize on the energy of the card for the reading? The way that I think people actually get information in a reading, I mean, there's three ways. You're physically looking at the card, so you're getting that information. You're thinking about the card in front of you, and then there's the intuition, which is kind of like that weird unknown. And I think I think we all have intuition, but yeah, I think the cards just kind of trigger the intuition. And eventually, I think it's very possible, and many psychics do this. You don't need the cards at all. And that's like, I love the cards because obviously I love tarot. That's what I do. So I'm always going to use them. But I think eventually you don't need them.
Did you say there was a purpose when you asked, are you outside of your vastness?
Huh? Oh, yeah.
What is the purpose of that?
I mean, my interpretation of it is like, it's kind of can get you to recognize your infinitude, whether you believe that or not. That's what it did for me, and I was
When
like,
you say, you've used that term before when you say infinitude, what do you exactly, how do you define that?
Infinity, like consciousness as an infinite being. I mean, I believe that people are infinite beings. That's just my belief, doesn't have to be yours. And I think the tarot hints at that based on some of its history and some of the ideas that were being worked into it. If you're looking at it more from a mystical lens, yeah.
When you say infinite beings, and I apologize, going back, using the same word to define it, can you use some other words besides the same word to define it?
Limitless, without boundary.
Are you talking about mind expansion, or you're talking about as an individual?
Both. Yeah.
So a sense of empowerment of sorts?
I think empowerment.
Because you're trying to, I guess, find a center or something, where you feel.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Positive
The center, the infinitely small center, but also the infinitely large space, which is an interesting concept. Maybe they're the same thing. Yeah. So the infinite mind idea. The reason why I did this exercise is to create this experience of this infinite mind, because it's definitely like a state of being, whatever you look at it psychologically or spiritually or physically. And I find that that's something that the tarot talks about esoterically. Now, that's not necessarily connected to divination with tarot. It's just another layer that you may choose to play with or not. But yeah, so it's part a philosophy, part an experience. Yeah, and kind of brings back to the Fool. So the Fool is like kind of the first card of the tarot. And my whole thing with the tarot, I believe tarot, like consciousness, includes everything but judges nothing. And the Fool is kind of complete trust. And the Fool is actually a symbol of infinity. So the Fool is complete potential. You can also look at the Fool as nothingness. That's another meaning of the Fool, infinite nothingness. This stuff gets really abstract because this has to do with the mysticism and stuff. But the Fool is like complete trust, jumping into something new. Everything is possible, which is that same feeling of infinite mind, or in some ways maybe the silent observer that we went into for a little bit. And then when we go to the magician, where is he? He's hiding. The magician is the mind doing stuff. So the mind focusing. So when it focuses, you ever see like in like photography, there's like sometimes there's something blurring and something clear. It's called the bokeh effect. The magician is like would be the ability of the mind to focus on something and let everything else blur. So that's why the function attributed to the magician is attention. And then between the Fool, which is absolutely everything, and the magician, which is focus, we get this 0 and 1 binary, and it creates the rest of the tarot deck. And then it goes from there, going into the Priestess, which is memory, Empress, which is imagination, so on and so forth, until we arrive at the world, which you may, if you want to say, could be this present moment, or the whole world, or the whole universe, or the end of the road, and then the recycling back into the Fool. Cool. So now that we've been talking about going into the wormhole a little bit, does anyone, we have a few minutes left, do we want to do Q&A, or if you want, I can take some time to like actually teach some tarot if you want to start playing with tarot?
Teach some tarot.
Teach some tarot. Okay, cool. So thank you all for going on that journey with me. I just love to go into the wormhole just for a little bit. Now we'll learn some tarot. So if you want, I don't know if everyone picked it up, but I have a worksheet from my school. You can look at that. And pretty much the way that I teach tarot is, I mean, there's so many ways to learn tarot, but there's 78 cards. And when I was a very young wee lad at 10 years old trying to learn tarot, it was very stressful because it was 78 cards. It was very aggravating. So over time, I've kind of taken like some of the esoteric stuff and figured out you can very easily learn it by learning the 22 majors. Those you still kind of have to learn. But you can learn the meaning of the numbers and the meaning of the court cards. So the basic structure of tarot is you have 22 major arcana. So those are like the archetypal cards, like the Fool, the Magician, cards that have names on them. And then you have 56 minor arcana, which translate to lesser secrets. So there's the big secrets, then there's the lesser secrets. The minor arcana have suits, and they have wands, cups, swords, or pentacles. Sometimes the suits change depending on the deck. And for each of those suits, you have numbers 1 through 10, and then you have 4 court cards. The names of the court cards can also change, but the deck that I'm using for this worksheet is the Rider-Waite Tarot, this guy over here. And what you can do is you can learn the meaning of the 10 numbers, and then those 10 and then we also have the 4 elements, so you have the 4 suits. So each suit has a meaning. So the suit of wands, for example, which is the suit of fire, usually has to do with something regarding career, creativity, ambition, or will. Then the suit of cups has to do with relationships, love, emotions, or intuition. And then the suit of swords has to do with the mind, society, conflict, ego. And the virtual, that's just something I added. I use swords for technology just because it's 2021, you know. That would be in the swords area. And then the pentacles would be money, health, work, material, and the body. So when you learn those 4 elements, and you don't have to learn them because you have the guide, but you take those 4 ideas, and if you pull, then you learn the 10 numbers and then the 4 court cards. So our 10 numbers are ace through 10. The ace symbolizes an opportunity for that element or that suit. So for example, the ace of wands would be an opportunity for career or creativity or ambition or will. The 2s show a force of that element, a force of love, a force of the mind, a force of money. The 3s show an understanding of the element. 3s can also be like a development or kind of, development, understanding. 4s show a stabilization of the element. If you think 4 legs on a table. 5 shows a challenge of the element, some difficulty in the realm of career, relationships, mind, money. The 6s show a victory of the element. 7s show your feelings or ambitions in the element. 7s are a little bit weird. 7 and 8s get a little bit weird, but 7s are like your feelings. I always think of 7 as engine. 7 equals engine. So if you see a 7 in tarot, it's like the engine. Keep going. Like the engine that keeps you going, keeps you moving. 8, I rhyme with fate. 8 is kind of like when you have to let go. Frozen, Let It Go. Love that movie. Great movie. So 8 is when you're letting go of something regarding, career, relationships, mind, money. 9 is the fulfillment of something, the end of the road. I say 9 is finish line. And then 10 is again. 10 is when you've not only finished your journey through the suit, but there's so much energy that it's going off in different directions and other people are starting their journey. So for example, when we go through the tarot, when we go through ace through 10, what we're looking at is a creative process. So let's say you're an artist. You start with the ace, you start with inspiration. You go through this whole process, and at the 9, your art is finished, and in the 10, you exhibit your art. And that exhibition becomes the ace for someone else. It inspires them to create their art, just as an example. You could use this for business. You can say the 9 is like giving birth, and then the 10 is like, or 10 might be giving birth. Ace might be love. You fall in love, all the things with the relationships, get married, give birth, that's another ace, another life. So it's kind of fractal like that. Fractal is a fun math thing that I don't really totally understand, but fractalization is fun to Google. So then we have 16 court cards, and these are 4 offices that represent 4 types of people. We have our king, queen, knight, and page. The king is usually someone that rules, someone in charge, someone that has some intellectual application to one of these elements. The queen, receptive, feminine, intuitive. Queens understand what needs to be done for things to happen. By the way, this is very outmoded. It's 2021, so they're still using gender in this way. We totally don't have to do that. So when I actually see a queen in the tarot deck, I don't say, oh, it's definitely a woman. It's just like an archetype. And I think we all have the king, queen, knight, and page in us all the time. That's just my philosophy. Take what you want. The knights are the impulsive, action-oriented characters of the deck. They're doers, a little reckless. And then the page are the young, naive, or studious characters in the deck. They're studying to do something. So a page of pentacles might be someone studying money, studying business. Page of swords, someone studying something intellectual. So you take these 4 meanings and then you multiply it by the meaning of the element, and then you get a meaning of the card. Now, the reason why I teach it this way is because it will help you, if you choose to read tarot and play with it, to actually find the meanings of the cards that you already know intuitively. And there are many books written about tarot, and they're amazing. And I know many tarot authors. I know a couple of them that are over there. You should totally read it. But I think what's cool about this is this practice allows you to actually think about the relationships between the patterns and the cards, the relationships of number and element, and that'll give you kind of a clear understanding of what's going on, and it will get you more versatile meanings. So that's why the 6 of Swords can mean helping someone, or it could be literally travel by water, or it could literally mean a computer chip. It could be all those things, because all those are connected with the idea of 6 and air coming together. And that, in some ways, how I believe people can get really intuitive hits, because the patterns they're working with in tarot encapsulate a lot of stuff, a lot of ideas. So that's the minor arcana. So once you learn that, you have over half the deck. That's 56 cards. The rest is the major arcana. Those you have to sit with for a little bit. But I don't think they're too challenging. But just kind of meditating with them for a while, reading over the meanings here or in other books, journaling about them. That's another good way to learn.
Did you attribute with the 4 colors up here, the 4 elements of the earth?
Yes.
And which is which?
So wands is fire,
Okay.
and then cups is water, and then the swords is air, and then pentacles is earth.
Thank you.
And that's the order that order comes from kind of late 1800s. It's like a remix of the Kabbalistic order. From Kabbalah, it's actually fire, air, water, earth. But the Hermetic order of the Golden Dawn switched it to fire, water, air, earth. And that's another thing that you can choose to work with or not. But yeah. Cool, yeah.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
When you're doing a reading, I've seen people put them in piles of 3 or spread them.
Yeah. So that's a good question. In terms of actual practice, it depends on you, and I find that different decks have different personalities. So I have certain decks that love to be spread out.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 30 minutes at 9 o'clock. If you need any assistance or a new library card, please keep the circulation desk at this time. Final checkout is at 8:55.
Well, I was like, where's that voice coming from? Did we go too far? That's a good question. It's completely up to you. I have like the deck that I use the most of the time. I have the client shuffle it however they want, but sometimes I'll spread it and have them pick. Completely up to you. When I'm reading for people online, I tell people to tell me when to stop.
Oh.
Yeah.
You tell them when to stop, or do they stop when they feel it's comfortable?
I tell them when they feel it's right to tell me to stop shuffling. If I'm doing like a remote reading. If I'm doing it in person, I have them shuffle if they're comfortable with it, or I'll have them tell me when to stop. Yeah.
So wouldn't you though get it stronger with the person actually doing it, this online stuff, where the other person's doing it, you're not,
Oh.
your real energy isn't really getting in there, correct?
That's a good question. So, though I do prefer being in person, I don't know, I'm kind of a robot. I love doing things online, so I feel it kind of works if like you have the intention there. I would say, yeah, maybe in person is better, but you know what I will actually tell you? Just from what I've experienced, when people get a reading from me online, for some reason, they're a little bit more open to like diving deep. I don't know why. Maybe it's the safety of their own home, maybe it's like there's a computer screen, but there's almost like they're more willing to open up and like go somewhere and like ask questions they might not ask if they were in person. But that's just what I found for me. But yeah, I think it works both ways. Yeah.
I don't like to let people touch my cards.
Totally valid. Very valid, totally. Yeah, the way I look at the tarot, it's kind of like a tool, like any good tool. I don't look at the cards as like a sacred thing that I have to keep like on an altar and all that, but I do look at them as like a tool that you have to clean if you want to keep it working for you. If it's a tool that served you really well, you want to like take care of it. So that's totally valid. I have decks that love to be shuffled by other people, and then some decks that don't really love to even leave the house, so I kind of leave it up to the deck sometimes. Yeah, but
How do you clarify, how do you clear them if someone handles them with a crystal or something? Sage?
You know, I don't. I just really use intention. So the magic words I use is return to center with consciousness attached, or I'll shuffle them with the intention of clearing them. Or like lately I've been playing a little bit with fanning powder, which I kind of like. Fanning powder just makes them really slippery and slidey. It's just a new thing I've been playing with. But yeah, I just kind of just have the intention, shuffle them, and yeah. Now, it's not to say that you guys can't use whatever works for you. I find a lot of this stuff is very personal for you. But I'm a very mental guy, clearly. I'm very like in the abstract world, so I use more intention and ideas than I do like physical things. I'm not as connected with like plants and minerals and crystals.
How did you get into this?
So I had a reading when I was really young. I was about 10 years old.
Wow.
And the reading was completely inaccurate, like nothing was true at all. And I still thought it was so cool. And I was like, how did this woman give me all that information from these cards? And then I just kind of got obsessed with it, and it's weaved in and out of my life since then in different ways. Yeah.
Because they're wrong a lot. Like, readers are wrong a lot, and when you say to them, no, that's really, they seem to get very angry at you. Well, that's what the cards say. Well,
yeah.
Are you reading for me? You know what I mean? Like, it's a...
Totally. So yeah, I mean, totally. I've definitely met readers that very unapproachable, and I've met readers that were amazing. I think with that, I think readers misdiagnosed, but so doctors also misdiagnose all the time too. So it's like definitely part of the trade. Like,
and isn't it divine timing too? Like you may hear something now, but it may be something that hasn't happened.
I think so too. There is what I call the Matrix effect. So if you haven't seen the Matrix, close your ears. But like, it's like Neo. It's like you're not the one, but she had to tell him he's not the one for him to be the one. So I've totally seen that happen before. But no, totally, yeah. Readers can be wrong. Readers misdiagnose all the time. Yeah, I think, yeah, totally. I have had clients that, not a lot, but I have had clients that like deny things, and they're denying something and it's fine, but like they're not willing to receive anything about something. Like I had I don't get them a lot at all, but just the other month at the fair, it was like literally the only bad reading of the whole season. And I gave the reading, and she's like, that was the worst reading, none of that's true. And then I looked down, and because I had that moment, because we all have that moment, am I going to doubt myself? And then I looked down, and I'm like, wait a second. And it's like, no, this happened in the past. And she's like, yeah, but it happened 3 years ago. And I'm like, well, it's still relevant. And she got up and walked away. I had a woman who was like, she asked me a bunch of questions about stuff, and I was saying like, okay, I'm seeing your daughter. And she's like, I don't have a daughter. I'm like, oh, well, I see somebody young. Oh, I don't know anybody young. And at the end, she literally says, well, see my daughter. And I'm like, so it's like, I think it's both. It can totally, yeah, but totally readers can misdiagnose all the time. And ultimately, and this is just my philosophy, but my advice is like, if you do consult a reader, like at the end of the day, you're obviously the authority of your life. In the same way that if you would consult anyone, a doctor or whatever, you're the authority of your life, so trust your intuition and trust your body more than anything. That's what I believe.